action. Now these hormones perform in a different way. It's not that it is going over the cells, acting on the cells, and the hormone is and deformations of the some sort of biochemical response have been achieved. But there is a stepwise thing, and these responses are carried out in a systematic way. The specific cell that responds to a given hormone has a receptor site for that hormone. Now, there is a sort of lock and key mechanism. When an hormone flows, we have seen in an early study, when an hormone flows in a blood vessel, that particular hormone reacts with that particular cell. So, if a hormone, it is like a lock and key. If all the cells, it is like the lock and key, means the particular key will open the particular lock. If it fits the lock, then the door will open. So if a hormone feeds the receptor site, then it will be affected. All the cells, in some cases, the target tissue is localized in a single gland or the organ, and in other cases the target tissue is diffused and scattered throughout the body, so that many areas are affected. Hormones bring about certain characteristic effects on the target cell by modifying their cellular activities. Now, they are specific in nature, means they act only on the one cells. They act only on the particular type of cells. They are specific in nature in only one type of cell. One type of cell. Now I've drawn a diagram of this is the nucleus, this inner part, outer is the cell membrane. Though it is an animal cell I have drawn, but still it seems like the cell wall, but it's not a cell wall. This whole thing is the cell membrane. It is for better, so that you can feel it better to understand it. So the green colors are the receptors present on the cell membrane, and these membrane bound receptors. And they are called the membrane bound receptors since they are present on the cell membrane. Now if these receptors lies inside the target cell, then it is called intercellular receptors. And if these receptors lies inside the nucleus, then it is called nuclear receptors. Okay, these are membrane bound receptors, we have already learned. And this pink color, this is the hormone which is coming from the outside. This is the hormone. This is coming towards the cell membrane, and it will just react with the cell membrane or the receptor cells present on the cell membrane, and a hormone receptor complex formed. And hormone receptor complex is formed. So this hormone receptor complex, in the other way we can tell that it is the binding of a hormone with a receptor, and it leads to some biochemical changes in the target tissue. When it binds in the target tissue, see this picture, when it binds with the target tissue, this hormone, some biochemical changes in the target tissue takes place. Now these membrane bound receptors do not enter the target cell. These receptors do not enter a target cell. These do not enter the target cell. But what they do? They do not enter the target cells, but generate the second messenger. They generate a second messenger, that is cyclic AMP, CAMP, IP3 or Ca2+. The generation of a second messenger takes place here. Now this second messenger, what does it do? It regulates the cellular metabolism. Then it regulates the cellular metabolism. And biochemical responses takes place. So psychological responses are there. An example here is given ovarian growth. It is a psychological response. So this is about membrane bound receptors. Now let us come to intercellular receptors. These are the intercellular receptors. They may be steroid, they are hormones, they are iodothyronines, etc. Now these hormones, there is a membrane, they regulate the gene expressions, chromosome functions. When they enters over there, they mixes with the genome. There is a genome, they mixes with the genome. The hormone receptor complex enters over there. A complex is formed. A complex is formed as it goes over there, and it expresses a hormone receptor complex with the genome. Now the steroids hormone are hydrophobic in nature, and this protein hormone are hydrophilic in nature. This one is hydrophobic. These are water soluble. Hydrophobic, they are they are soluble in fat. The fears what? Hydrophobic. There is a phobia for water.
Why hydrophobic?
Hydrophobic. And they are easily fat soluble, and thus they enter over here. But the protein hormone, they are hydrophilic in nature. So now let us study some differences of the hormone and the steroid hormone. This protein hormone react with the receptors on the surface of the cell, and steroid hormone, it reacts on the inside of the cell, and protein hormone on the surface of the cell. In protein hormone, the hormone action is very rapid. In steroid hormone action is comparatively slow, relatively slow. And in steroid hormone, this actually involves the synthesis of the protein. Now this is a defined picture. So any picture may come from different books in the NEET. So I've shown the same picture over there in PBS in the last page, so that you will not be confused in the examination. So let me show you this picture. This is a hormone, how the proteins, peptides and modified amino acids, this is a protein hormone, how they react over there. This is a hormone, this is hydrophilic in nature, I told you. And these hormones, the start or the end terminal, they're exposed at exterior of the cell. It enters through the plasma membrane 7 times, and the other end is called the C terminal, it projecting into the cytoplasm. They make a complex over there. This is the receptor over there. Now the protein over there, it activates this hydrophilic hormone, and they bind together on the surface of the target cells. The target cells. Point number 1. So this receptor is the transmembrane in the protein, and this binding takes place in the extracellular portion. In the extracellular portion, this binding takes place in the extracellular portion of the receptor. This is the binding takes place over here. That is on the surfaces of the targeted cell. Now this cell responds to hormones. Then what happens? The behavior of the cell is altered. So opening and closing of the membrane channel takes place. Now the promoters turned on and off. stimulates, it stimulates or regulates gene expression in the nucleus, and it enhances actions of the genes. Now activates G protein associated with cytoplasmic C terminal. It activates G protein. Now it activates this G protein. It activates this G protein, which is associated with cytoplasmic C. This is the cytoplasmic C terminal. The cytoplasm, it activates the G protein. Now this initiates production of a second messenger. And the enzyme responsible for this is adenyl cyclase. This is the adenyl cyclase. This enzyme is responsible. It changes ATP to CMP, cyclic adenoside monophosphate. Its full form is cyclic adenoside monophosphate. Now what do this second messenger do? The second messenger initiates the events. What are the events it initiates? Number one is phosphorylation and activation of the enzyme. And number two, release of Ca++, which is stored within cytoplasm. Now in case of CMP, this enzymatic change, that is enzymatic change, it activates the transcription factor PrEP, CREB. It is CAMP response element binding protein. It is called CAMP response element binding protein. Now this activated CREB turns on gene transcription. It turns on the gene transcription. The CREB turns on the gene transcription over here. This is the DNA or the gene. Cell starts producing appropriate gene products. That means cell starts producing appropriate gene products. What does it mean? It means it responds to the hormonal signal it had received on its surface. Now the steroid hormone, I am telling you that this is a picture from a different book. So the gene here is stretched. You have not seen in that book that the gene is not stretched over there. So the gene is stretched actually, and this is the DNA chromatin. This transcription taking place. So messenger RNA, translation, specific protein, metabolic response, all the same. The pictures are different so that you will not be able to be confused. There is a picture also taken from a book, how steroid hormones. This is acting with the receptor and the complex is formed. Now it is the acceptor. This produces the genes and it acts on mRNA. It is the ribosome. Translation takes place and thus new protein is formed. And thus new protein is formed here. It's a direct gene activation mechanism of the steroid hormone. Now being hydrophobic, that is diffused freely in all cells, they are fat soluble. The target cell contains cytoplasmic of the nuclear protein, that is on which it targets. The target cell means the receptor. It contains this cytoplasmic, and this contains cytoplasmic and the nuclear proteins. It contains cytoplasmic and nuclear proteins. They serve as the receptor of the hormone. They serve as the receptor. They serve as the hormone receptor. They serve as the hormone receptor. Now hormone binds this receptor and the complex is formed. We know it binds to hormone receptor complex. So stretches of DNA within the promoters of genes, stretches of DNA. These are the stretches of DNA. The hormone receptor complex acts as a transcription factor turning target gene on off. This hormone receptor element acts as a transcription factor. This hormone receptor element acts as a transcription factor turning it's on or off. Now by translation, the messenger RNA, this mRNA, is decoded to produce the specific sequence of amino acids in a polypeptide chain. Specific sequence of amino acids in a polypeptide chain. It produces it by transcription. So what happens ultimately? mRNA is formed. Then by translation, this protein synthesis takes place, and protein formed is responsible for biological action of the steroid. So this is all about the steroid hormone.